Let's start at the beginning. Let's start with a woman sitting alone at a desk. Her name is Sybil Van Antwerp. She is 73 years old. She lives by herself in a house in Annapolis, Maryland, a quiet, pretty city on the edge of the Chesapeake Bay, where old colonial buildings line the streets and sailboats drift past on the water. It's the kind of place that feels like time moves a little slower than everywhere else, and that suits Sybil just fine. From the outside, Sybil's life looks small. She doesn't travel. She doesn't go to parties. She's retired from her career in the law. Her marriage ended in divorce years ago. Her 2 adult children live their own lives at a respectful distance. She tends her garden with great care and devotion. She reads constantly, novel after novel, stacked on her nightstand. And every single morning, she sits down at her writing desk and she writes letters. Not emails, not texts. Real letters, the kind you write by hand or type on a proper machine, fold carefully into an envelope, address, stamp, and walk to the postbox. This is Sybil's practice. It has been her practice for most of her adult life, and at 73, it is in many ways the thing that keeps her most alive. She writes to her brother Felix, who lives in the south of France in a village called Gourd, a sun-soaked hilltop town full of stone walls and olive trees. She writes to former colleagues from her years working in the law. She writes to authors whose books she has loved, sometimes praising them, sometimes arguing with them, sometimes just wanting to tell them that something they wrote made her feel less alone in the world. She has written to Joan Didion. She has written to Larry McMurtry. She has written to Anne Patchett. Whether those letters were ever answered is another matter entirely. She writes to neighbors. She writes to local officials when she disagrees with a decision. She writes to companies that have disappointed her with their customer service in a tone that is civil but absolutely withering. She writes to a young boy named Harry Landy, the son of a former colleague, because she feels a strange and genuine tenderness toward him that she doesn't fully understand yet. And she writes to someone else, someone whose name we don't know yet. Letters she keeps in a drawer. Letters she writes and writes and writes, but never, not once, puts in an envelope and sends. That drawer is the mystery at the heart of this story. Those unsent letters are the secret Sybil is keeping, not from us exactly, but from herself, and the whole novel is the long, slow, painful, sometimes funny, sometimes devastating process of Sybil finally being honest with the people around her and with herself. Now, to understand where Sybil is going, you need to understand where she's been. She grew up on the east coast of the United States. She was adopted, a fact she has always known, and one she still has complicated feelings about. Somewhere out there are her birth parents, or at least the records of them. Does she want to know? She's not sure. It's one of those doors she keeps walking past without opening. She was a smart, serious young woman who went into the law, which, in her era, for a woman, was not a common or easy path. She became a clerk for a circuit court judge named Guy Donnelly, a man of significant intelligence and presence, and she worked alongside him for the better part of her career. Their professional relationship was deep and meaningful. He was her intellectual equal, her champion in many ways, the person who took her seriously when the world around her often didn't. And because of that, people occasionally assumed it was something more. It wasn't. But that assumption followed her. She married. She had children. She had a life that, on paper, looked full and successful. And then something happened that broke the story open, something so painful that Sybil spent the decades afterward learning to live around it rather than through it. Her son died. He was 8 years old. We don't get this information all at once. It comes to us the way grief actually works, in pieces, sideways, glimpsed, and then retreated from. A reference here, a silence there. The way Sybil's handwriting, usually so controlled, becomes something different when she approaches the subject. The way she steers letters away from certain topics with such practiced skill that you almost don't notice she's doing it. But eventually, we understand. She lost a child, and whatever happened around that loss, the ways she coped or didn't cope, the things she said or didn't say, the ways she may have pulled away from the people who needed her, or pushed away the people she needed. That loss is still the center of everything. 20, 30, 40 years later, it is still the sun that her whole emotional life orbits around. She divorced. She retreated. She built a life that was orderly and controlled and full of routine and books and letters and a very beautiful garden. A life where she could be herself, witty, opinionated, sharp, caring, without having to be too exposed, because exposure, for Sybil, had come to feel dangerous. If you love something too much, you lose it, and she has already lost enough. The novel begins in 2012. Sybil is 73, comfortable in her small, managed life. And then the world starts knocking on the door she has carefully closed. The first knock is the death of Guy Donnelly. She gets the news one ordinary morning. Her old colleague, the judge she clerked for, the man who defined so much of her professional life, is dead. And almost immediately, the press runs a story. An article that looks back at Guy Donnelly's career and mentions, with that particular kind of journalistic coyness that is really just insinuation with better grammar, that he had a remarkably close working relationship with Sybil Van Antwerp, a relationship that was apparently not limited to professional matters. Sybil is furious. Absolutely, properly furious. It wasn't like that. It was never like that. Their relationship was intellectual and professional, and she respected him enormously, but it was not romantic. And the idea that her career, her serious, carefully built career in the law, is being reduced to a suggestion of an affair is the kind of thing that makes Sybil pick up her pen and write some very controlled, very pointed, very dangerous letters. Guy Donnelly's wife asks Sybil to speak at the funeral. She accepts because it is the right thing to do, even though it terrifies her. And this is the first moment we see something important about Sybil. She almost always does the right thing, eventually. It might take her a while. She might argue with herself extensively on the page first, but she gets there. Around the funeral, there is another complication. A stranger named D.M. sends Sybil a threatening letter about Guy's death, cryptic, unsettling, something she can't quite make sense of. She goes to the funeral anyway, accompanied by James Landy, her former protege, whose son Harry she has been writing to. And it is at this funeral, surrounded by people from her old professional life, that Sybil begins to realize how much she has been hiding, not just from other people, from herself. Around the same time, a man named Mick Watts reappears in her life. He's a former acquaintance, recently widowed, and he writes to Sybil wanting to take her out to dinner. He's warm and friendly and clearly interested in her company. Sybil refuses, politely but firmly. She's not interested in being taken out to dinner. She's not interested in being someone's companion in their grief. She's not particularly interested in being anyone's anything right now. And you read her refusal and you think, fair enough, that's her choice. But then you keep reading and you start to wonder, is Sybil protecting her peace? Or is she just hiding again? Because hiding is something Sybil is very, very good at. She hides in her garden. She hides in her books. She hides in the elegant, controlled formality of her letters, which allow her to be present and connected and engaged with the world, while simultaneously keeping everyone at exactly the distance she has chosen. And she is hiding something else too, something physical. Sybil's eyesight is failing. Slowly, steadily, her vision is deteriorating, and she is not telling most people. You see it creep into certain letters, a mention to Felix here, a reference to needing help with something she used to do easily there. She doesn't want to be diminished by it. She doesn't want people to worry or to treat her differently or to make her into a project. She has spent her whole life being capable and independent and in control, and the idea of losing that, of needing people in ways she can't manage or contain, frightens her more than she will ever say out loud. And so she carries it quietly, and you feel the weight of it getting heavier as the years pass. Now, one of the great joys of this novel, before we get to the more devastating parts, is the sheer variety of people Sybil writes to, and what each relationship reveals about her. Because the thing about Sybil is that she is not one thing. She contains multitudes, as they say, and different correspondences draw out different versions of her. With her brother Felix in France, she's easy and warm and funny in a way she rarely allows herself to be with others. Felix knows her. He has always known her. He doesn't need things explained, and he pushes back when he thinks she's wrong, and she lets him, which she doesn't let many people do. Their letters have the rhythm of a lifelong conversation, and reading them feels like being allowed to overhear something private and good. With young Harry Landy, she is something else entirely, unexpectedly tender, openly encouraging in a way that her adult relationships rarely allow. Harry is a sensitive, bookish boy being bullied at school, and Sybil, this prickly, sharp, self-contained woman, becomes something like a guardian angel to him through their correspondence. She recommends books, she listens, she tells him, in her particular way, that the world is much bigger than wherever he is right now, and that he will find his people. And you watch Harry, through his letters back to her, slowly gain confidence. And you realize something quietly extraordinary. Sybil, who cannot seem to lower her guard with the adults in her life, is completely, openly loving with this child. No armor, no irony, just care. It tells you everything about what she might have been if things had gone differently. With Bassam, the Syrian man she begins writing to, the correspondence starts awkwardly. Sybil makes some missteps in her early letters, assumptions she isn't entirely aware she has, a certain cultural condescension she would be mortified to recognize in herself. She does recognize it eventually, and she apologizes. The apology is genuinely felt, even though it comes wrapped in considerable self-justification, because this is Sybil, and she is incapable of a clean apology without also explaining herself at length. But Bassam responds with grace and warmth, and their correspondence grows into something real. He is one of the voices in the book that helps Sybil see herself more clearly, not through confrontation, but through the simple dignity of writing back. And then there are the letters to authors. Oh, the letters to authors. These are sometimes laugh-out-loud funny. Sybil writes to novelists with the confidence of a woman who has read absolutely everything and is not remotely intimidated by anyone's reputation. She writes to Diana Gabaldon about Outlander with that particular energy of a reader who has very strong opinions about a series. She writes to Anne Patchett with the kind of careful, considered appreciation that is also, if you read between the lines, criticism. She's a reader in the truest sense, someone who takes books personally, who argues with them, who is changed by them, who feels she has the right to talk back. Every letter she writes to an author is also, in a way, a love letter. Even the critical ones, especially the critical ones. And running through all of this, through every single letter she writes to every single person, is one small recurring detail that book lovers in particular will find completely irresistible. At the end of nearly every letter, Sybil tells her correspondent what she is currently reading, and then she asks what they are reading, every single time, without fail. It is her ritual and her question and her way of saying, "This is how I connect with people. This is how I know you. Tell me what world you are living inside right now, and I will tell you mine." But underneath all of this brightness, the wit, the garden club drama, the letters to famous authors, the dinners she refuses and the arguments she has on the page, underneath all of it, there is the drawer. There are the letters she writes and never sends. And the more you read, the more you understand what they are. They are letters to her son, the boy who died when he was 8 years old. Sybil has been writing to him in the quiet of her study, in the privacy of paper no one will ever read, for years and years and years. These are the letters where all the armor comes off. The wit disappears, the careful sentences, the controlled opinions, the practiced composure, all of it falls away. What's left is a mother talking to her child, saying the things she never said while he was alive, asking his forgiveness for things she did and didn't do. telling him about her days, her garden, the books she's reading, telling him she misses him, telling him she's sorry. These sections of the novel are quietly, absolutely devastating, and they reframe everything you have read before them, because you look back at all of Sybil's careful distance, all her controlled independence, all the relationships she has managed and measured and kept at arm's length, and you understand. It isn't that she doesn't love people. It's that she loves them so much, and she has already learned the most brutal lesson that loving someone too much can teach you. She is not cold, she is terrified. The novel spans 10 years, 2012 to 2022, and over those 10 years, you watch Sybil change. Not dramatically, not in a movie-style transformation with a single turning point and a swelling soundtrack. The change is gradual and human and sometimes almost invisible, but it is real. She begins slowly, reluctantly, sometimes gracelessly to let people in. The walls come down not all at once, but brick by brick, letter by letter. Mick Watts, the man whose dinner invitation she refused, does not disappear from her life. He keeps writing, and Sybil eventually writes back differently. Not because she has changed her mind about everything, but because something in her has loosened slightly enough to let a little light through. She makes amends. Some of the most moving sequences in the novel are the letters where Sybil writes to someone she once hurt and acknowledges in plain language that she was wrong. These letters cost her enormously. You can feel it in every sentence. She is not someone who says sorry easily. She has a deep, ingrained belief in her own correctness that she has spent decades nurturing. And yet, she writes the difficult letter. She says the hard thing. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, she receives something back that surprises her. Forgiveness she wasn't sure she deserved. Understanding she didn't expect. The discovery that the other person was waiting too. Her relationship with her adult children evolves. These are not simple letters. These are letters full of the particular kind of love and tension that exists between a parent who has been imperfect and children who have had to absorb that imperfection. Sybil doesn't become a different mother overnight, but she becomes more honest. She stops pretending. She says things she has been holding for years, and something begins to shift. As her eyesight worsens and she can no longer manage everything alone, she accepts help. She accepts it with commentary. She accepts it while making absolutely clear what she thinks about needing it. But she accepts it. And in that acceptance, in that small surrender of the fierce independence she has armored herself in for so long, there is something that looks like growth and feels, quietly, like relief. And somewhere along the way, in a moment you feel, rather than see, she stops writing the letters to the drawer and starts letting that grief exist out in the open instead. In the spaces between her other letters, in the way she talks about Harry Landy and the boy he is becoming, in the tenderness she shows without apology toward the end of the book. Her son is still with her. He is just, finally, allowed to be. What makes this novel extraordinary, technically speaking, is that none of this is told to you directly. There is no narrator standing outside the story explaining what is happening. There is no scene where Sybil looks in a mirror and reflects on her journey. There are only the letters, sent and unsent. The story lives entirely in correspondence, and yet, and this is Virginia Evans's real achievement, it feels more interior, more emotionally precise, more like being inside a human mind than many novels written in first person. Every letter Sybil writes tells you two things, what she is saying and what she is not saying. The gap between those two things is where the real story lives, and the book asks you, quietly, to think about your own gaps, the things you have not said, the letters you have written in your head and never sent, the people you have kept at a careful distance because something in you decided that was safer. It asks whether that safety is worth what it costs. At its core, this is a novel about the courage it takes to reach out. Every letter Sybil writes is an act of courage, whether it feels like one or not. Writing to a stranger, saying you were wrong, telling someone you are struggling, writing to an author you admire and risking being ignored, writing to a child who is hurting and offering him your honest, imperfect self instead of reassurance you don't believe. These are small acts. They are also enormous ones. The novel argues gently, persistently, beautifully that connection is the point, that sitting down and writing, "I am here, and I am thinking of you, and I want to know what you are reading," is one of the most profound and underrated things a human being can do. And it argues, more painfully, that the connections we fail to make, the letters we draft but never send, the words we have but keep to ourselves, the love we feel but don't express, those are the losses we carry the longest. Not the things that happened to us, the things we didn't say. Sybil Van Antwerp is cranky and brilliant and self-righteous and tender and funny and sad and deeply, deeply human. By the time you finish this book, she feels like someone you know, someone you want to write to. And this novel itself, The Correspondent, had a journey not unlike its protagonist. It was published in April 2025. It didn't explode overnight. It found its audience the way a letter does. One reader at a time, passed from hand to hand, recommended quietly and urgently. By February 2026, it was at the top of the New York Times bestseller list. It won the PEN/Hemingway Award for debut novel. A film starring Jane Fonda was announced, and Virginia Evans, who had written 8 novels that never found a publisher, who had spent 20 years querying and being rejected and starting over again, finally had her moment. There is something deeply fitting about that. A novel about the importance of persistence, about writing again and again, even when no one writes back, about believing that the words matter even when you cannot prove it yet. If this story moves you, and it will, go and find a person you have been meaning to reach out to. Write them something. It does not have to be long. It does not have to be perfect. Just reach out. As Sybil herself might say, the written word, in black and white, it is letters, it is books, it is everything. It is all the same.